Natalie Brooks smoothed down the front of her navy blue dress as she held Sophie's tiny hand. The restaurant doors gleamed before them, tall and imposing with brass handles that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. She had promised Sophie something special for her 6th birthday, and Riverside Grill was the nicest place she could manage after saving tips from her waitressing job for 3 months. Sophie's brown curls bounced as she looked up at the elegant building. Her eyes sparkled with excitement, wearing the yellow sundress that Natalie had found at the thrift store and carefully mended where the hem had come loose. The dress looked perfect on her daughter, and that was all that mattered. Stepping into another world, the hostess glanced at them with barely concealed judgment as they entered. Natalie felt the familiar sting of being assessed and found wanting. Her dress was clean and pressed, but clearly inexpensive. Her shoes were comfortable flats rather than fashionable heels. Everything about her screamed that she did not belong in this world of crystal glasses and fresh flowers on every table. "Reservation for Brooks," Natalie said quietly, keeping her voice steady despite the flutter of nervousness in her chest. The hostess checked her tablet with manicured fingers. "Yes, table 16. Follow me, please." They were led to a small table near the kitchen doors, tucked away in a corner where the less affluent customers could be hidden from the more prestigious diners. Natalie bit back her frustration and smiled at Sophie instead. "Look at this fancy napkin, Mommy," Sophie whispered, unfolding the cloth with reverence. "It feels so soft." "It does, sweetie," Natalie agreed, her heart swelling with love for her daughter who found wonder in the smallest things. This was why she worked herself to exhaustion every single day. These moments of joy on Sophie's face made everything worthwhile. The reality of their situation. The menu arrived and Natalie's stomach dropped as she scanned the prices. Even the children's meals cost more than she had anticipated. She had budgeted carefully, but inflation had pushed prices higher since she last checked online. Her mental calculations shifted rapidly as she tried to figure out what they could afford without using the credit card that was already dangerously close to its limit. "What would you like, birthday girl?" Natalie asked, keeping her tone light. Sophie studied the menu seriously, her small finger tracing over the words she was learning to read. "Can we share something, Mommy?" "I'm not super hungry." Natalie's throat tightened. Sophie was always hungry. She was a growing child who never complained even when Natalie stretched their meals thin at the end of each month. Her daughter had learned too young to ask for less than she needed. "We're celebrating you today," Natalie said firmly. "You can have whatever you want." The waiter appeared, his professional smile not quite reaching his eyes as he looked at their simple clothing. "Have you decided?" "We'll have the garden salad and the cheese ravioli," Natalie said, choosing the least expensive items that would still provide some nutrition. "We'll share both dishes." "Very well," the waiter replied, collecting their menus with efficient movements. "Anything to drink besides water?" "Water is perfect, thank you." An observant stranger, as they waited for their food, Natalie noticed Sophie's attention drifting across the restaurant. Following her daughter's gaze, she saw a man dining alone at a prominent table by the window. He was probably in his late 30s, with dark hair and an air of quiet confidence that came from never having to worry about money. His table held multiple dishes, far more food than one person could possibly eat. James Thornton had noticed the little girl watching him several minutes ago. He had built his software company from nothing and made his fortune by paying attention to details others missed. What he noticed now was not just a curious child, but the careful way her mother divided their shared salad onto 2 plates, giving the larger portion to her daughter. He noticed the worn but clean clothing, the way the mother's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her napkin, the birthday celebration that consisted of the cheapest items on an already modest menu. "Mommy, why does that man have so much food?" Sophie asked in her innocent way. "Is he very hungry?" "Shh, sweetheart," Natalie whispered, mortified. "We don't stare at other people while they eat," but James had heard the question. He looked over and met Natalie's eyes for a brief moment. She quickly looked away, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. She focused intently on cutting the ravioli into smaller pieces for Sophie, pretending she had not noticed his attention. The generous gesture. Their meal was simple but warm, and Sophie seemed happy enough with her birthday dinner. Natalie forced herself to eat slowly, making their food last as long as possible. This was their celebration, their special moment, and she refused to let financial anxiety ruin it completely. When the waiter brought their check, Natalie had already calculated the total with tip. She had exactly enough in her purse, with $3 remaining for bus fare home. She placed the cash in the folder and closed it with finality. "Excuse me?" a deep voice said beside their table. Natalie looked up to find the man from the window table standing there. Up close, he was even more imposing, but his expression was kind rather than judgmental. "I apologize for interrupting," James continued, "but I could not help overhearing that today is a birthday celebration." He looked at Sophie with genuine warmth. "Happy birthday. How old are you today?" 6, Sophie answered shyly, holding up 6 fingers. "6 is a wonderful age," James said. He turned to Natalie. "I hope this does not seem forward, but I have far too much dessert at my table. The chef always sends out more than I can possibly eat, and it seems a shame to waste it on a birthday. Would you both consider joining me? It would actually be doing me a favor." Natalie hesitated, pride warring with the desire to give Sophie something special. Before she could respond, Sophie's hopeful voice broke through her uncertainty. "Could we, Mommy? Please," looking into her daughter's eager face. Then, at the genuine kindness in this stranger's eyes, Natalie made a decision that would change everything. "That's very kind of you," she said softly. "We would be honored." James led them to his table by the window, where the city lights were beginning to twinkle as evening settled over the harbor. He pulled out chairs for both Natalie and Sophie with genuine courtesy that felt natural rather than showy. Up close, Natalie could see the laugh lines around his eyes and the warmth in his expression that softened his otherwise serious face. He was silent for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because I see myself in your situation," he finally said. "Years ago, someone gave me a chance when they had no logical reason to. An investor believed in my idea when every bank had turned me down. That chance changed my entire life. I have spent years trying to pay that forward, but it's always felt impersonal, distant. Then I met you and Sophie, and I realized this was my opportunity to truly help someone in a meaningful way." He reached across and gently took her hand, the gesture both comforting and electrifying. "I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. Take the weekend to think about it. Talk to the references I'll provide, visit our offices and meet the team. Make an informed decision based on facts, not fear." Natalie felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. Hope was dangerous. Hope could break you when it inevitably shattered. But looking into James's steady, sincere gaze, she felt something shift inside her. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll think about it." James smiled, squeezing her hand gently before releasing it. "That's all I ask. Take your time, Natalie. This offer isn't going anywhere." As she walked home that evening, Natalie felt the weight of possibility settling around her shoulders. Her carefully controlled world was shifting, expanding into something she had never dared to imagine. The question was whether she had the courage to step into this new reality, to trust that good things could actually happen to people like her. Sophie was waiting at their apartment window when Natalie arrived, her face pressed against the glass. When she saw her mother, she waved enthusiastically, her smile bright enough to light up the gathering darkness. Looking at her daughter, Natalie knew what her answer would be. For Sophie's future, for the possibilities that lay ahead, she would find the courage to say yes. Monday morning arrived with autumn sunshine streaming through the windows of Natalie's small apartment. She had spent the entire weekend researching James's company, calling the references he provided, and lying awake at night weighing her options. Every person she spoke with praised James's integrity and the genuine impact of his community programs. The salary he offered was more than double what she currently made from both jobs combined. Sophie sat at the kitchen table eating cereal, swinging her legs beneath the chair. She had no idea that today might mark the beginning of an entirely new chapter in their lives. "Are you going to work at the diner today, Mommy?" Sophie asked through a mouthful of cornflakes. Actually, sweetheart, Mommy has a very important meeting. This morning, Natalie replied, smoothing down the front of her best blouse. Remember James, our friend from the restaurant? Sophie's face lit up immediately. Is he coming to visit us? Not exactly. I'm going to visit his office to talk about a new job. Natalie knelt down beside Sophie's chair, taking her small hands. It might mean some big changes for us, good changes. Would you be okay with that? Sophie considered this seriously, her brown eyes thoughtful beyond her years. Will we still be together? Always, Natalie promised, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. Nothing will ever change that. The office visit James's company occupied 3 floors of a modern building downtown. The lobby was bright and welcoming, with plants and comfortable seating that created an atmosphere more like a living room than a corporate space. Natalie felt her nervousness increase as she gave her name to the receptionist. Ms. Brooks, welcome, the young woman said warmly. Mr. Thornton is expecting you. I'll take you up right away. The elevator ride felt too short. Natalie tried to steady her breathing, reminding herself that she had nothing to lose by exploring this opportunity. James was waiting when the doors opened, his smile genuine and reassuring. Natalie, thank you for coming, he said, gesturing down the hallway. Let me show you around before we talk details. The tour revealed a company culture unlike anything Natalie had experienced. Employees worked in collaborative spaces with natural light and flexible arrangements. There was a child care center on the 2nd floor where staff could bring their children when school was closed or child care fell through. The community outreach program occupied an entire wing, with training rooms equipped with computers and a staff of dedicated coordinators. This is where you would work, James explained, showing her a bright office with windows overlooking the harbor. You would have a team of 4 people to start, with room to expand as the program grows. Your job would be to connect with community organizations, identify people who could benefit from our training programs, and help remove barriers that prevent them from accessing opportunities. Natalie walked to the window, looking out at the water sparkling in the distance. From this vantage point, she could almost see the neighborhood where she lived, the invisible line between her world and this one suddenly feeling crossable. Can I be honest with you? She asked, turning to face James. Always, he replied. I'm terrified, Natalie admitted. I'm terrified that I'll fail, that I'm not qualified, that I'll let you down. I'm terrified that this is too good to be real and something will go wrong. But I'm also terrified of staying where I am, of never taking a chance, of teaching Sophie that we should play it safe instead of reaching for something better. James crossed the room to stand beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. Fear is rational, he said quietly. Change is scary, especially when you've learned that the world is not always kind. But I believe in you, Natalie. I have watched you handle impossible situations with grace and determination. I have seen your intelligence, your compassion, your strength. You are more than qualified for this position. A confession of connection. They sat in the office chairs, the formal interview Natalie expected transforming into something more personal. James leaned forward, his expression serious but open. I need to tell you something, he began. My interest in offering you this position is professional, but my interest in you and Sophie has become personal. I find myself thinking about you both constantly. I look forward to our conversations at the diner more than any business meeting. I have not felt this way about anyone in years, and it both excites and terrifies me. Natalie's heart hammered in her chest. She had sensed the growing connection between them, but had convinced herself she was imagining it, that men like James did not develop romantic feelings for struggling single mothers. I don't want you to feel pressured, James continued quickly. The job offer stands regardless of your personal feelings toward me. If you want to keep things strictly professional, I will respect that completely. But I needed to be honest about where I stand, because honesty is the foundation of anything meaningful. Natalie took a deep breath, gathering courage from somewhere deep inside herself. "I feel it too," she confessed. "From that first night at the restaurant, there was something between us. I kept telling myself it was impossible that we come. From different worlds, that I should protect myself and Sophie from disappointment. But the truth is, you make me feel seen in a way I have not felt in years. You treat Sophie like she matters, like her thoughts and dreams are important. You make us both feel valued." James reached across and took her hand, the gesture tender and full of promise. "Then let's take this one step at a time," he said. "Accept the job if it feels right for your career. Let's continue getting to know each other without rushing anything. I'm not going anywhere, Natalie. I want to be part of your life, part of Sophie's life, if you'll let me." The revelation over coffee in the company cafe, James shared the story he had kept hidden for years. His childhood had not been one of privilege and ease. He had grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes, never feeling like he truly belonged anywhere. Education had been his escape route, scholarships and student loans his ticket to a better future. "I built this company not just for profit, but to create the kind of opportunities I wished had existed when I was struggling," James explained. "Every community program, every initiative we fund comes from remembering what it felt like to be on the outside looking in. When I saw you and Sophie that night at the restaurant, I saw myself and the mother I barely remember, the one who tried so hard to give me good moments despite having nothing." Tears streamed down Natalie's face as she listened. She had assumed James could never truly understand her world, but he had lived a version of it himself. His success had not erased his empathy or his memory of hardship. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" she asked, wiping her eyes with a napkin. "Because I wanted you to see me as I am now, not feel sorry for who I was then," James replied. "But I realize that my past is part of who I am. It shaped my values, my priorities, my capacity for compassion. I'm not ashamed of where I came from anymore. It made me who I needed to be." Natalie accepted the position that afternoon. Her 2 weeks' notice at both jobs felt like shedding old skin, stepping out of a life that had become too small for her growing sense of possibility. The staff at Harbor Diner threw her a small goodbye party, genuinely happy to see her moving towards something better. Even her supervisor at the medical supply company expressed pride in her advancement. Sophie adjusted to their new routine with the resilience of childhood. Natalie's office had become a second home where Sophie did homework after school, colored pictures for James's desk, and charmed every employee who stopped by to say hello. The company child care center welcomed her on days when school was closed, providing activities and socialization that enriched her young life. The financial transformation was profound. For the first time in years, Natalie could buy groceries without calculating every item's cost. She could replace Sophie's worn shoes without anxiety, could afford the school field trip she had previously declined, could save money for emergencies instead of living in constant fear of the next unexpected expense. The weight of financial stress began lifting from her shoulders, allowing her to breathe freely. But more significant than the material changes was the emotional transformation. James became a constant presence in their lives, not as a benefactor but as a partner. He attended Sophie's school events, helped with homework, read bedtime stories with silly voices that made Sophie giggle uncontrollably. He treated Natalie as an equal, valuing her opinions on business matters and personal decisions alike. Love takes root 6. Months after that birthday dinner at Riverside Grill, James took Natalie and Sophie to the harbor on a crisp spring evening. They walked along the waterfront, eating ice cream and watching boats drift past on calm water. Sophie ran ahead, chasing seagulls with her arms spread like wings. "I have something to ask you both," James said, his hand warm around Natalie's. "Sophie, can you come here for a moment?" Sophie bounded over, her face flushed and happy. James knelt down so he could look at her directly, treating her question with the seriousness it deserved. "Sophie, I love your mother very much," he said simply. "And I love you too. I would like to ask your permission to marry your mom and become a family together. What do you think about that?" Sophie's eyes went wide. She looked from James to her mother and back again, processing this enormous question. "Would you be my dad?" she asked quietly. "I would be honored to be your dad," James replied. "If that's something you want." Sophie threw her arms around his neck, answering without words. James held her close, his eyes meeting Natalie's over Sophie's shoulder. The love in his gaze took her breath away. When Sophie released him, James stood and turned to Natalie. He did not have a ring or elaborate speech prepared. Instead, he simply took both her hands in his and spoke from his heart. "Natalie, you have taught me that success is not measured in money or achievements, but in love and connection. You and Sophie have given me something I did not know I was missing, a family, a home, a reason to come back at the end of each day. Will you marry me?" Natalie felt tears of joy streaming down her face. She thought about the scared woman who had walked into that restaurant months ago, who had been too proud to accept help, who had believed good things did not happen to people like her. She thought about all the walls she had built around her heart and how James had patiently dismantled them brick by brick with kindness and genuine love. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Full circle. The wedding was small and intimate, held in the garden behind James's home that had become their home. Sophie served as flower girl, scattering petals with solemn concentration. Natalie wore a simple white dress that made her feel beautiful, not because of its cost, but because of the love reflected in James's eyes when he saw her. As they exchanged vows, Natalie thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. A chance encounter, a billionaire who looked beyond appearances to see genuine need, a single mother who found courage to accept help and open her heart. Their story had not followed any predictable pattern, yet it felt absolutely right. The community outreach program flourished under Natalie's leadership, helping dozens of families find pathways to better lives. She brought authenticity and understanding to the work that no business degree could teach. James's company grew not just in profits but in purpose, becoming known for genuinely caring about community impact. Sophie thrived in their blended family, her natural joy expanding to fill the security and love that surrounded her. She still drew pictures constantly, but now they depicted a family of 3, stick figures holding hands under a bright sun. On quiet evenings, when Sophie was asleep and they sat together watching the city lights, Natalie would sometimes think back to that birthday dinner. She would remember the shame of their modest meal, the fear in her heart, the impossible distance between their table and James's world. And she would marvel at how one act of genuine kindness, one moment of truly seeing another person's struggle, could transform multiple lives so completely. "What are you thinking about?" James would ask, pulling her closer. "How lucky we are," Natalie would reply. "How everything changed because you noticed what was missing from Sophie's plate." James would smile and kiss her forehead. "I noticed what was missing from my life," he would correct gently. "You both filled it perfectly." Their love story had begun with scarcity and observation, with a little girl's empty plate catching the attention of a man who remembered his own childhood hunger. It transformed into abundance and connection, proving that the most meaningful riches have nothing to do with money and everything to do with opening your heart to possibility, to change, to love when it appears in unexpected forms. They had each been searching for something without knowing it. And in finding each other, they discovered that home is not a place, but a feeling. Family is not defined by biology, but by choice. And love has the power to rewrite any story if you are brave enough to turn the page.